YouTube, what's going on? Jamar here, Vegas Sense. Got another quick video that I'm gonna do here, and this one, I don't have the full bottle of the fragrance, but I do have a 10 ml decant here, and this is gonna be of Bleu de Chanel Eau de Parfum. Okay, so this particular fragrance, I wanted to get a decant of this because of all of the, I guess you could say, hype around this particular fragrance. This was something that I saw that was getting compared to like Dior Sauvage, Versace Dylan Blue, as well as, in some cases like Acqua di Gio Profumo. And I had decant samples of the other three fragrances, because those were some of the first fragrances that I, wanted to smell when I first started getting into fragrances, like around this time last year. And I started getting like some of my first fragrances from scentbox.com. That was before I was really trying to commit to buying like a full bottle of anything. Now after using that service for a few months, I quickly saw that, paying, on the low end, which was I think about $15 a month, up to like the premium membership, which is what I had, and that one was like $30 a month. I quickly started to see that I could get full bottles of certain fragrances, that were around $30 or a little bit more, and again, it would be for the full fragrance. So it didn't really make sense in my eyes to pay $30 for two 8 milliliter, decant samples or whatever of a fragrance. That didn't make any sense to me. So I want to say I paid about $15, I think, actually, for this 10 ml sample of Bleu de Chanel Eau de Parfum. And when I first smelled this, I was blown away by it. I'm not gonna lie. Like I really did like the scent of this. I really, really loved it. But I would say as I started to smell other fragrances, or maybe start to wear some other fragrances more, this fragrance kind of became like, it's okay. And I think part of that is because this fragrance doesn't perform as well on me as the other fragrances do. So this is the weakest performing, I guess you could say, blue fresh fragrance out of all of those other fragrances. Typically when I spray this on me, I'll go like 4 to 5 sprays max or so, and I'll normally get, I don't know, maybe a good hour to an hour and a half of projection, and then this is typically completely gone off of my skin, I would say within probably 6 to 7 hours or so, which, again, that's definitely the least or worst performing out of all of those. So also the other thing too is in terms of, I guess you could say, just overall smell, this is really my least favorite out of all of those. I do love the grapefruit that you get in the opening. In the opening you really do get like this blast of just fresh, citrusy, it's really nice. And just to kind of go over the notes here, in the top you have lemon, grapefruit, pink pepper, bergamot, coriander, mint, actually, which I don't really get too much mint out of this, but it does have mint, and aldehydes. And then in the middle you have melon, jasmine, you have ginger, and nutmeg. And then in the base you have labdanum, patchouli, incense, sandalwood, cedar. You have amber and amber wood. So, and that's actually really, I guess you could say it's kind of surprising to me because I could have swore that this fragrance had, either ambroxan or ambergris in it. Because when it dries down, really that's kind of what it smells like to me. It smells like it has some form of amber or ambroxan in it, but I guess it doesn't. But that's the typical vibe that I get from this particular fragrance. Once it dries down, and I would say that's normally after like hour and a half, 2 hours or so. Um, that's the vibe that I get from it. Now, this is, I would say, on the more mature smelling side when it comes to all of the other fresh, fragrances. So like Dior Sauvage, I would say is probably for, you know, um, anywhere from like, let's say 16 to probably 25. I would say even the same thing with like Versace Dylan Blue. That one is more so, I would say, probably geared towards, younger people. And then this one, I would say, is more so geared towards the guy that's like, you know, probably over 25, so like 30 and up. Same thing with Acqua di Gio Profumo. I think that one kind of has like a more mature, professional type vibe to it. So that one I would say is probably more so geared towards people who are 30 or above as well. Okay, so the main thing that I'll say about this fragrance that puts it at the bottom of the list for me anyway when it comes to these fresh blue theme type fragrances is the price. So that's like my number one gripe with Chanel fragrances. um you know a lot of them, they smell great, I'm sure. This is the only Chanel fragrance that I've smelled so far. But the constant theme that I see with Chanel fragrances is they're typically, I guess you could say, kind of simple, average scents, at least, most of their newer releases. And they normally cost somewhere in the ballpark of like $150. And in my opinion, for a designer fragrance, that's just, it's not, it's ridiculous. Um, and I mean, even if you try to look for this discounted, like, I went ahead and pulled this up here on eBay, and for 3.4 ounce bottles of Bleu de Chanel Eau de Parfum, this still goes for, on the low end, around $95, up to, looks like the most expensive bottle on here right now is $110.99 plus $8.99 shipping. Okay. And okay, so I see they have one on here for like full retail, which it looks like full retail for this is $169. This is not $170 fragrance whatsoever. In my opinion, to my nose, this smells the most basic of those, generic so-called, shower gel type fresh scents. I really don't think that this is worth the money for this particular fragrance. So, I mean, I'm glad that I have the decant of this. But I mean, you can see, like, I've had this particular fragrance, I want to say, since at least probably August or September, I want to say. I want to say probably August. It is now basically the end of December, and I haven't even gone through, 10 milliliters of this particular fragrance. So I couldn't imagine buying this fragrance like in a full bottle for, like 100, almost $200. Like, to me, that's crazy. Um, it it's not worth the money. That's all I can really say when it comes to this fragrance. So I mean, I guess if you are like some sort of collector and you buy fragrances to kind of collect them, then okay, I can see that. I don't really consider myself a collector when it comes to fragrances. I do consider myself more so an enthusiast of fragrances. I like to try a lot of different fragrances, but whenever I buy a fragrance, to me it has to make sense for me to buy the fragrance. So it has to be a fragrance typically that has good longevity and performance and that is at a decent price. So that's why I do have like a lot of clones of more expensive type fragrances. I'll never buy a bottle of Creed or anything like that because the price to me just isn't worth it. It's never worth it, in my opinion, to buy a fragrance that's over $400. Or even if you were to find a Creed fragrance discounted for, let's say, $300, still not really worth it, in my opinion. Especially with Creed, because from what I see, the performance on those don't really justify that price tag either. Okay, so again, I would say out of the fresh fragrances, this is probably, I mean, unless you really don't care about the price, this is probably the worst choice to make. Now again, I'm not saying that this is a bad fragrance. I'm not saying that I don't like this fragrance, because I do like this fragrance. But when I compare it to Dior Sauvage, Acqua di Gio Profumo, and Versace Dylan Bleu, this one is in dead last place, okay? So as far as a rating on this fragrance goes, I would give this a solid 8. It's definitely a good fragrance. It's not great, but it's good, okay? As far as the longevity on this fragrance goes, like I said, I get maybe 6 to 7 hours. Projection like an hour and a half or so. It's not it's not the best performing fragrance, I would say. Okay, so if you don't have any fresh fragrance and you want to try this one out, check it out. But I would say if you don't have any of the 4 fragrances or any of the other 3 fragrances, I'm sorry, that I'm comparing this to, try those out first, because you might like the way those smell better, as opposed to paying such a high price for a Chanel fragrance. Okay, all right, so that's my take again on Bleu de Chanel Eau de Parfum, and I will see y'all in the next video.